This video was brought to you by Brilliant. Over the last few months, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has become somewhat of an unlikely force in European politics. Having previously trashed the EU and called its institutions rotten to the core, she's begun to take a more pragmatic approach, and now her hard right views on immigration and even her climate skepticism have started to seep into decision-making in Brussels. Even the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is increasingly courting Meloni, who she sees as a crucial ally in her own bid for re-election. So in this video, we'll take a look at Meloni's politics, how she wants to mould the EU, and whether she can succeed.
Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos.
So let's take a look at what Meloni wants from the EU. Firstly, to give you a bit of context, Meloni, who leads the right-wing Brothers of Italy party, has always been very Eurosceptic and previously called for Italy to leave the Eurozone, which she said was obsolete. She's also firmly against the idea of further European integration, pushing for a more sovereignist EU, made up of individual nations that put their own national interest before the collective European one. When Meloni won Italy's general election in 2022, her nationalist views put her at odds with the centrist EU governments of France, Germany and the Netherlands, and the then Dutch Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, actually called her victory a cause for concern. But over the 2 years she's been in power, Meloni's stance towards the EU has softened somewhat, and it looks like she's now trying to reshape the bloc from within. Basically, Meloni wants looser structures and a more right-wing EU parliament that will give her and other similarly nationalist parties more influence over European politics, particularly over a few areas that we'll look at now: immigration, the green transition, and the EU's bureaucracy. So first up is the EU's migration politics. Meloni rose to power in Italy by vowing to promote national identity and defend what her party sees as traditional European culture, in a similar way to Hungary's Viktor Orbán. Meloni's views on immigration and cultural mixing are also pretty extreme, and in her 2021 autobiography, she warned of the dangers of ethnic substitution and the dilution of Europe's Christian culture. So she's clamped down hard, introducing a range of tough immigration policies targeting undocumented arrivals to Italy from North Africa, such as tougher detention measures, restrictions on sea rescue charities, and 10 new migrant detention centres in Albania. Crucially, she's also influenced the EU's recent immigration policies too, with Brussels increasing its collaboration with Africa to try and stem the flow of small boats across the Mediterranean. Now, Meloni's second big concern is the EU's climate agenda, which she has two main issues with. Firstly, she sees it as an ideological issue of the left, and secondly, she's concerned about the impact that the EU's green energy targets will have on European industry and the economy more widely. Brothers of Italy voted against the EU's nature restoration laws, which have now been shelved after Hungary signalled its opposition on Monday. And Italy has also opposed the EU's plans to ban fossil fuel-powered vehicles by 2035. Politically, farmers are a key voter group for Brothers of Italy, and the huge protests we saw earlier this year resulted in Meloni promising tax breaks for the agricultural sector and pushing Brussels to give farmers more concessions by scrapping various regulations from the EU's 2030 climate targets. Economically too, Meloni wants to bolster Italian industry, which is strong in iron, steel and car manufacturing and machinery. And Italy's economy is made up mostly of small and medium-sized businesses that can't afford to invest in capital-intensive and bureaucratic climate programs. Now finally, Meloni's third major concern is EU bureaucracy. Meloni said in December that the EU needs to go from being a bureaucratic giant to a political giant, and that the EU needs to reform its budget, bureaucracy and justice systems. Meloni's Brothers of Italy party is a member of the European Conservatives and Reformists, or ECR, parliamentary group, whose whole thing is opposing European integration. The ECR's manifesto says the EU is, quote, too centralised, too ambitious and too out of touch with ordinary citizens, and it sets out 6 objectives for reform: that the EU respects its member states, focuses on specific areas, is more flexible, more democratically accountable, delivers value for money, and is more outward-looking. Now, the ECR, along with other right-wing groups, is expected to win lots more seats in the June elections, which would give Meloni more power to try and enact these changes. Polling analysis by the European Council of Foreign Relations predicts that the ECR will gain 18 seats, bringing its total to 85, and more if Orbán's Fidesz party, which Meloni has been trying to convince to join the ECR rather than remain unaffiliated, decides to join it too. So will Meloni's plan for Europe work? Well, there's already some signs that the EU is coming round to Meloni's way of thinking on certain issues. Looking at immigration, for example, the EU has certainly taken a leaf out of Meloni's book by striking up new deals with African nations to stop unauthorised migration to Europe, with Brussels this month pledging €210 million to Mauritania and €7.4 billion to Egypt, with at least €200 million specifically for migration. The EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has also taken on some of Meloni's tougher language, having toured Lampedusa with her in September and saying, "We will decide who comes to the European Union and under what circumstances, not the smugglers." Ultimately, though, how much sway Meloni actually has over Europe will be decided by two things: the European Parliament elections and whether she can maintain popularity in Italy. Currently, she's looking pretty secure in Italy, and her polling is slightly stronger than when she was first elected, while Italy's economy is set to continue growing slowly in 2024 and see improved investment in 2025. There's also little threat to her leadership at home, with the centre-left opposition in disarray, and Meloni's coalition partners are unlikely to unseat her. Nevertheless, Meloni hopes to win more seats in the European Parliament and have more influence on the European Commission after the June elections, and we can already see Meloni's increased efforts to swing things her way. She's working to build a coalition of conservative and nationalist forces, which may or may not include Orbán's Fidesz party, who will all put their own national interests first. However, even if Meloni manages to assemble enough troops to swing the pendulum right in the EU Parliament, that won't necessarily mean that they all agree on how to tackle issues like migration, Ukraine, and economic issues. For example, the Sweden Democrats have already threatened to quit the ECR if Fidesz joins, due to Orbán's coziness with Putin. So the next few months will be a big test of Meloni's negotiation skills heading into the elections and thereafter. Now, understanding exactly what's going to happen here can be a little tricky, requiring you to evaluate lots of information from different, often partial sources. It would be sensible then to begin improving your critical thinking skills so that you can keep sharp and better understand what's going on. And well, our sponsor Brilliant.org can help you do just that. Brilliant is the online learning platform that's designed specifically to teach you everything from maths, data analysis, programming, and AI from the ground up. You don't need a fancy degree or to have dedicated hundreds of hours to studying any of these. All you need is a device with an internet connection and a few spare minutes each day. And with your spare few minutes, you'll learn by actually doing, with Brilliant providing hands-on lessons that let you play around with concepts, a method that has been shown to be 6 times more effective than just watching lectures. And what makes this even better is that this content is created by an award-winning team of teachers, researchers, and professionals from MIT, Caltech, Duke, Microsoft, and more. You can try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days if you click on the link in the description. That way, you'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription.